And hello, everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Music Evolves. This is Sean Martin, your host, where I have the pleasure of talking about a topic that I love, which is music, and meeting new friends who share the same or similar passion for the same topic of music in many forms. As you can imagine, the show is called Music Evolves. It's all about where music's come from and how it's transformed itself, has transformed us, and where it's headed. And I'm thrilled to have Sommer McCoy join me today. Sommer, it's fabulous to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Very
We're
excited.
yeah, super fun. A few weeks in the works pulling this together through an introduction, a mutual friend, Larry Jaffe, who's
Yeah,
a really good guy. Really good guy.
sure.
He's also here in New York, and so his introduction was revolving around the Mixtape Museum, which I was like, that sounds really cool. Let's definitely talk about that. But there's so much more to what you're working on and all the stuff that you do, Summer. So I wanted to kind of touch on some of that stuff first. So maybe just a quick background of kind of your involvement, early involvement in music, and what inspired you to be involved in the way that you
Yeah,
are now.
so sure, happy to talk about it. My background actually started in the music industry, managing hip hop artists. Um, so I worked primarily with the Clipse out of Virginia, where my family's from. I started out as my cousin's assistant. Shout out to Anthony. Um, and I was in New York, even though I was working with the group that lived in Virginia. So I was kind of had a good position to be in the center of everything and being able to manage their day-to-day business, and be close to the labels and things like that. And then from there, I stayed in hip hop, but got really interested in hip hop education and also documenting the history of hip hop. And it wasn't until the Clips had to use a mixtape, their first mixtape, to they were in the middle of a dispute with Jive Records, I think it was, and weren't able to put out an album. And we had to rely on a mixtape. We got it for cheap, volume one. And that's when I learned about mixtapes, the power of mixtapes. I mean, I knew about my personal relationship with them, but having to use them professionally to boost their music, that's where all of this started. So the Mixtape Museum started from us needing the mixtape to help push their career during this time when they could not put out music because of the labels.
Right. Well, I know we were going to get to that, but let's just dive in right there, and then we'll come back to some of the BAM stuff as well. But 'cause that's super interesting. I think a lot of people listening might have a personal connection to mixtapes as a listener, but you're describing the other side of it as an artist and as a producer and as a performer, and so tell us a little bit more about that story and the connection or the disconnection maybe with the labels in that sense.
Yeah, so I mean, the great thing about mixtapes, I mean, even in our personal lives, like it wasn't the same restrictions as listening to an album, right? Like, um, I think of my first, one of my first CDs, which was like, I think it was like Michael Jackson. My mom's boyfriend gave me a boombox. This is like CD era. Um, and that's really when I started making, when I, it's just a moment I remember, like this CD and this boombox, and me being able to record from the CD onto tape. Now, I did record from tape to tape, but when the CD came and I was just older and I just have this memory, I really realized how much I was able to curate my tapes the way I wanted to, right? I didn't have to listen to the album from track one to track 14. I had this like sudden freedom to do what I wanted. And not only that, I didn't have to just have hip hop or pop or rock, right? Like I could also mix music onto one little cassette. Um, and my experience before that in my bedroom was recording off the radio, like, from DJ Red Alert onto tape. and then maybe giving that to friends or like recording my voice onto tape. Um, so that same freedom, we saw that with the Clipse when, during that time, the labels were not really interested in what artists were doing on mixtape, right? Like, and what I mean by that is with albums, the label has full control over who you produce with, when it's released, some of the marketing. With mixtapes, artists began to use this blank canvas as a means to create their own street album. It's sometimes what you hear in hip hop. Um, and it just means that you have this freedom to do what you want. So the Clipse at that time uh, knew that the label could not do much. They even, I believe, leaked the song onto the mixtape, just to kind of like slight the label. Um, but I just want to rewind also back even before artists were using mixtapes. There was a moment in hip hop where DJs were using mixtapes and recording their sets at the club. And then
Hmm.
eventually they were making mixtapes in their studios, right? And then using that excitement to distribute those recordings to the public. Um, and that's really, I mean, with the cassette, it was, tiny. You could record, fit in your pocket, you could mail it. So not just for hip hop, but the cassette was like a vehicle for a lot of music around that time because it was easy to move around.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah,
there's
that's
been an
that's my experience
evolution.
with the mixtape as well. I mean, uh, I grew up in LA, and around the time hip hop and DJs were coming out, I mean, that I probably have a stack of mixtapes. I'm not in LA at the moment, but there's probably a stack of mixtapes in LA from different DJs in the LA area putting their own tracks together, their own mixes together, their own scratching on top of it, and creating their own persona using these tapes and sharing with others. And I mean, I still cherish a number of those mixes because they obviously bring back a lot of memories as well.
Yeah, if you still have those tapes, I might tap you for a mixtape memory for the
For the
Mixtape
museum,
Museum.
exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the museum in that regard then, because why was it, or what is it, first off, just so people know what it is?
Um, it's
And so the physical collection still exists as well? Just those collection, yeah, no, MySpace kinda, yeah.
Celebrate the creators of tapes and the people who are studying them. I am just wrapping up. I have to finish my final report actually, but the Grammy Preservation Foundation gave me a grant to preserve mixtapes. So that's what I've been working on the last couple of months, which has been really exciting.
That is
So
exciting.
yeah, I started with a few tapes. I was able to do about 70 tapes with the grant, but also just get things moving so that I can start helping collectors. Like my collection is nothing compared to some of the collectors. Shout out to Tape Master. He has a collection the size of a small nursery, and it's just tapes of like on his walls from the
Wow,
floor to the ceiling. So I would like to support collectors like that who have their collections at home, and want to
right.
save them and preserve them.
Because the goal isn't necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not to consolidate collections into a single museum, it's to document the collections and the history behind those collections, right? Or is
Yeah.
it something
So
more?
yeah, well, I mean, I'm a database manager by day. So data is really important. And when you think about cassettes, mixtapes on cassette, right? The J cards where we would write the
Mhm,
track listing, that's metadata. It's just analog metadata that we
right?
may not have been documenting then, but if we save those J cards, my goal is to bring all of that into the digital realm, right? So with the tapes from the Grammy preservation project, I was able to digitize these tapes but there still has to be like identifying some of the artists, some of the songs. And I may not be able to do this all on my own, right? Because some of these tapes are before my time, maybe. Which is really exciting. Like the best thing about this project has been talking to so many people about like their experience and their knowledge, and being able to identify what some of these songs are. But I recognize also as a database person that you're not going to get all the data, right? Like I'm not going to be able to save every mixtape from every Nike shoebox and basement in the world. Like I recognize that. But for the ones that I do, I would like to see, an example is if we look at a mixtape collection, how many times might an artist appear on a tape, right? And then let's look at their history, right? We could look at Stretch and Bobbito, right? They had a radio show at Columbia's radio station a few decades ago, and those shows were taped by so many listeners. And they even have a great collection of their tapes. But like, I would like to look at that data to see how their show impacted said artist that they had on their show. Do you know what I mean? And there's other trends and things that we can pull from that. So yes, it's um, I don't remember your question exactly, but it's
Well, the different collections, people have their own personal collections. The goal isn't to take over their collection. The goal is to
oh yeah,
digitize and preserve what they are
correct. Because I have
with
no
giving
place
it
to
back.
put them.
Yes.
I
It
don't have
is
a
New
place
York,
to put
everybody.
them yet. Yeah, I'm more
That'll
interested. I'm really interested in the people who have collections, how they got their collections, how they're caring for their collections, um, how they interact with other collectors. So I have no interest in taking people's tapes and hoarding them in, because I have no place to put them but in my house for now. It wasn't until we were all home during COVID that I was like, I wonder what a mixtape museum building would look like. Um, so I've been thinking more about that, and also collaborating with other institutions and entities that may be interested in like an exhibit, until maybe one day there's a permanent home. But I'm really interested in studying the people who are studying tapes, and those people are usually studying the people that create the mixtapes, right? It's the stories that come out of the tapes because for whatever reason, when you say the word mixtape in a room, people have stories. They just come out. So that's one of the reasons why I really started focusing on collecting people's mixtape memories and what makes them, like, what memories conjure up when they start thinking about mixtapes.
Right. Do you have any stories that come to mind?
Oh my gosh, I have so many stories. I was talking to my godbrother recently about our camp that we used to go to every summer up in Massachusetts. Um, and the only thing we could bring were books and like, I mean, there were no cell phones back then, so that wasn't the distraction.
Right? It'd be different
But we
camp
could
all
bring
the time.
books and like, I would bring my Walkman. I had a Walkman and a CD player at that time. We had, yeah. Um, but a lot of people to prepare for camp, you weren't just preparing your shorts and your hiking boots, right? It was also like, oh, let me create this mixtape. Most of the kids I went to camp with were not from the area. We were all coming from different places. So that was the beauty of being able to like make these tapes and bring them. And I was just talking about that with my godbrother the other day. When I went to Hampton University in Virginia, the one tape I took with me was DJ Doo-Wop's 95 Live. This is one of the best mixtapes in the history of hip hop mixtapes. Shout out to DJ Doo-Wop. Um, I still have that exact tape. And it was that tape was copied by so many people, because it had just dropped in 95, hence Doo-Wop 95 Live. And I went to Hampton in 95. And I brought that tape from New York down to Hampton, Virginia, and it was copied a bazillion times. And I just wrote actually a short mixtape memory for the Association for Recorded Sound Collections newsletter, like like a year or couple years ago, because that tape is so important to the the history of hip hop, and also it was released during the time where DJs were moving away from tape onto CD mixtape. So Doo-Wop's 95 Live, he ended up putting it out on CD not too long after. But also the mixtape was white labeled, like in other countries because it was so popular. So that's just two short stories, but there's so many. There's so many.
How about, what is I'm curious, what's the white label thing mean? It's just
So the white
not under his
label,
name?
yeah, no, so the white label is, and this would happen even with the Clipse when I work with the Clipse. It's interesting because white label kind of takes on the form of a mixtape because you can take a song or music and we would ship it to a distributor. I can think of people in Japan, Germany, and they would print it up on vinyl, right? But there's no label. It was just a white
Hmm,
label and
okay.
maybe typeface,
Literally white label.
what literally white label. And it would be distributed not through the label. And you're seeing a lot of these white label vinyl, but also like I remember seeing cassettes. I mean, there was a distribution of cassettes also from DJs or from music from artists here that happened in other countries. That's how popular these tapes were. Um, and then they would be redistributed. But for an artist, that's like free promo, you know?
Yep, absolutely. How about have you connected with a lot of collectors, I guess? Is that the right term for them? Collectors?
Yeah, collectors, yeah. Well, yes, one of the first things I did was form a group of friends, supporters. These were people that were supporting Justo and Justo Mixtape Awards, people who were fans of DJs and mixtape DJs. Um, a lot of people here from New York, so people I threw out the name Tape Master, Eric Johnson. Um, I relied on them to connect me with other collectors. And what ended up happening was they connected with people from who are collectors from literally all over the world who have collections of cassettes. Um, and forward to right now, today, I sit on the board for the Association for Recorded Sound Collections. And I targeted that organization because when I found out about it early and got involved, not only were they supporting my work, but I realized that like these collectors are researchers, right? Like they live with their collections, whether your collection's on vinyl, CD, cassette, or wire recordings, right? They're experts, and their work and their research needs to be highlighted outside of just wherever their collections live. Um, so that was one of the first things I did was connect with collectors because the collectors have already connected with each other. During the blog era, when blogs were real popular, especially for the hip hop industry, a lot of collectors were digitizing their tapes, and they would just get a plug and play uh, digitizer from like I don't know PC Richards or something like that. Not the best audio, not an official archival copy like what I'm getting from the Grammy Preservation Grant, but enough for them to upload it to their personal blog and share it with people that wanted to just have a copy of it. Um, so yeah, I connected with tons and tons of collectors, and they really are. There's the DJs, but the collectors for me are really important and have been like supporting the research and the vision and the work, and also guiding what I'm doing a lot of the time.
Right. Now, do you find there's an overlap of similar or same mixtapes between collectors, or Is there one wildly popular one that everybody has, or or a few of them,
I mean, yeah, everybody
all
has
over the
Doo Wop
board, I'm
95
sure.
Live. Yeah, everyone has Doo Wop 95 Live. Everyone has a Tony Touch mixtape. Tony Touch named a lot of his tapes by number. So it'd be like Tony Touch number 57 or something like that. The other interesting thing is when collectors copy tapes to give to other collectors, there's something that happens there that I'm really interested in, right? The sound, every time you copy something, like the sound, it degrades the sound. So
Right?
I'm also interested in the life cycle of tapes, how it's passed. And, if I have a tape, I think of it almost like forensics, right? It's like, how can an engineer, one thing I'm not is an engineer. Like, I'm not in the studio. I do work with people who are engineers, preservation engineers or whatnot. Um, but I am very interested in, if you get a tape and you can tell that if I know the year it came out, even looking at the actual tape, there were so many brands of tapes, right?
Yep.
Maxell,
60-minute,
TDK,
90 minutes, all these.
90, right? If you were special, you could get 120. Um, but like also just that sound, the forensics of the sound quality, if you will, when people copy tapes, because it was that copying of tapes that helped build community, right? Because you were able to give someone something that meant something, or you were doing it for promotion, you know?
So clearly, documenting is a huge thing for you. You do this broader. You mentioned it broader for hip hop in general, not just for mixtapes. What does that work look like? Because you've been doing that for even
Wow.
longer, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I noticed was after Justo, founder of the Mixtape Awards, passed away, I was like, wait a minute. Like, I didn't record the stories and the history that he taught me. It's not anywhere, right? And then when I started working in academia and combing through JSTOR and through all of these scholarly journals, I'm like, where's the hip hop, right? Like, where's the documentation of hip hop? Like, who's writing about it? Um, but there were already a community of people. I instantly found a good friend of mine, Martha Diaz, who had started the Hip Hop Education Center at NYU, where she was funding scholars who were studying hip hop, or they were using hip hop in their classrooms to teach young people at different levels, K through 12, but also university level. Um, and there was just a need to document. My experience with documentation, it was actually through, there's so much more.
So you mentioned earlier analyzing it in specific, you're in the context of the mixtape and kind of looking at which artists were prevalent in different areas and different songs and things like that. I'm sure there's tons of metadata and metadata you can use to kind of analyze and mix and match and get different stories out of it. From the bigger picture of the documentation that you've done for hip hop, are there any, I don't know, if signals or stories or something in the work that you've done that surfaced that you didn't expect, and or maybe that somebody listening might not know about, only because you documented a collection of information that is there? Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Data that we're not even thinking of. Uh, but I think this Grammy grant, as I'm going through the audio and listening, most of the tapes that I use for the Grammy grant are from a collector um, who has passed away. So I was donated his tapes from the Gates Preserve. But his tapes were, and I'll send you images after
Okay.
we wrap up. But he was a graffiti artist, and not a known graffiti artist, but his covers, his J cards were so ornate, and they were all handmade, whether it was collage or marker. And in every tape, he used, not every tape, but a lot of his tapes, instead of using the J card, he used the index card as the track listing, and then the J card was the like image. I don't even know how to describe it. But some of his larger graffiti work went to the Graffiti Museum down in Florida, um,
Oh,
which is really exciting. So that actually exists. There's a graffiti museum in Florida.
okay. It's probably a good place for it. um, I'm gonna thank you for all of that. And yeah, and I kind of put you on the spot in terms of the data analysis, but maybe more philosophical view of this, where the evolution of hip hop and its I joked, but the disconnect between hip hop and the labels and mainstream access and mainstream adoption and love for it, and the mixtape mixed into all of that as well. How did that evolution? How how and when did that kind of take place? And my next question will be how how is it shaped now? I mean, we can look at the digital world and playlist, but that's not the same. So
Yeah,
maybe the history first, kind of how things evolved over the years.
yeah. Well, I'll start by saying that, playlists and our phones and all of the curating we do, it is the evolution of the cassette. Without the cassette, I don't think we would have had like iTunes, whatever we're using now, like, Apple Music or whatever. Um, the cassette, first of all, was not even made for music. It was made for like dictation, like office dictation. Um, so I think that's important to note because again, the cassette brings out like uh, a spirit of like entrepreneurship almost. And I think the evolution speaks to that. Um, but once we were able to capture music onto cassette, and then had the boombox, right? The boombox and the cassette. Um,
Right.
hip hop, for a lot of hip hop artists then, like the cassette was, and DJs and artists, the cassette was their final release, right? Like they may not have had a record deal, but they could make copies of tapes, whether they were doing it themselves or, I mean, Justo even introduced me to people who had um, tape duplicators. I mean, not my little boombox that had two cassettes, but I mean, like, they could do hundreds of copies of tapes at like within minutes, if not seconds, not seconds, but minutes. Um, so again, it's that entrepreneurship that drove those artists, those DJs to use the cassette to promote themselves. A lot of those artists traveled, right? If you had an artist that was traveling to France, I think of Epi, I call him the mixtape journalist. He's a journalist out of Paris who I met because he wanted to do a story and he was doing research on cassettes. But he talked about in his mixtape memory how he would go to concerts, not necessarily because of the artist, but because he knew that artist was traveling with their DJ. And their DJ, they always came with their tapes because who didn't have a merch table, right? So that's how, some of those tapes were able to make it to different countries. And of course, once you have this tape circulating in Paris, then there's a demand to bring maybe not just that artist, but then that DJ to DJ a club in another country, right? So that entrepreneurship, it's viral um, on cassette. And then I think we also with cassettes, particularly with hip hop, there's different genres of cassettes, of different genres of say like an example would be like there were DJs that specialized in reggae mixtapes. There were DJs that specialized in R&B mixtapes, right? DJ Ron G was responsible for breaking Mary J. Blige. He did it on a mixtape. It wasn't the radio that broke it. It was the distribution of this tape where he remixed her song with hip hop, right? And then put it on his tape and then
And
his
then
tape was distributed.
and played in clubs and parties and
Exactly.
wherever else. Yep.
Exactly. And imagine like, oh, it's on tape, but like what if a DJ wants to play it in a club on vinyl? That's where your white labels might come in, you know? So, uh yeah, so I mean the mixtape is it's it's a case study of entrepreneurship. I mean, if you even look at Lou Ottens, who created the cassette tape, with his team, if you watch a cassette documentary by my friend Zach, it's on Amazon streaming. He got to really get close and up and personal with Lou. And also met his team of engineers and like the designers and other people. Um, they were all in their 80s and 90s when he met them and got to interview them. And Lou, for a little while, didn't really have like a real connection to the tape, right? Like, you have to just watch the documentary. I actually just interviewed
Mm.
Zach here in Harlem, and he talked about how Lou was just so humble about like this thing that helped revolutionize the world. um,
Right.
yeah, but he passed away a couple years ago, so that was really sad. But
Mm.
again, on the internet, on the Twitter at the time when he passed away, people were mixtape memories everywhere. They were just
Mm.
everywhere. Like people were just reaching back into their memory and their childhood. A lot of the DJs talked about how cassettes changed their careers. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, that's what it is, right? Music touches us somehow, some way.
yeah,
Certainly through our ears, but if you're in a club, maybe through the beat, but also mentally, right? And
yeah,
it's often connected to where we are and how we're feeling at the moment, and who we're with, and what we're thinking about, and all of that. I'll say mixed together, right?
yeah. I think what's
Um,
interesting also is sometimes like I can think of a mixtape that I've made, and for whatever reason, you might remember the first and last song. Like I may not remember what's in the middle, but I remember the first and last because it was just important. Like how you opened and how you
right?
closed the tape. And a lot of
Yeah,
people, who I
again, yeah,
speak to, they remember the first and last song on a mixtape.
yeah. What what do you think's next? Because the one thing, and maybe it's just I'm lazy or haven't looked at it, but the creative element of creating a mixtape um, isn't captured in a playlist for me,
Yeah,
and especially if it's a mix that's recorded during a performance, right, where there's live elements to it, and you can't get that from two recorded tracks on Spotify and stick them together in a playlist. You lose some of that. Is there, I guess, is there a resurgence? Do you see any in a desire to have mixtapes in that medium? I'm talking to Larry Jaffe.
I was
There's
gonna,
obviously a resurgence in vinyl. Do we
yeah,
see something similar in tapes?
yeah. Well, Larry's also very passionate about. I actually visited his class a couple months ago and got to talk about mixtapes with his class.
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's someone, and Larry and I talked about this. Someone um tried to do like a mixtape store day or cassette store day or something like that. Um, Not sure where it is now. But for a little while, when I saw it popular, especially on Instagram, I would repost and engage with the Mixtape Museum account, with the Mixtape Museum's account with Cassette Store Day. Um, Look, I am collecting artists that are active right now who are putting out music on cassette.
Hmm.
They're not distributing it on cassette. They're putting out novelty items, right? They're putting out trying to think, Megan the Stallion. Like I think that's one of the last tapes that I got because she,
Okay.
dropped the song and decided to put out a few copies on, collectors items. Um,
Right.
but I think that there's plants that exist, right, where they're still printing tapes. There's tons of stores. I mean, go to Brooklyn and enter any music store or even, like secondhand store or thrift shop, I find tapes in there all the time,
Yeah.
and there's always someone
Do you
else
uncover
looking for
mixtapes
them.
in there?
Oh,
You uncover mixtapes?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And what's fun about that is you don't know where they're coming from or whose they are.
Right?
So I don't go in there looking for a ton of tapes. But when I am inside of a thrift shop, I'm absolutely looking, or any type of music store. The first place I go is to the tape table. Like there may just be a table, but
Okay.
and
Thanks
everything
thanks
else
for
is
giving me a
vinyl.
a nice little OCD item to work on anytime I'm in a store now.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what you find.
Go straight there.
Zach, the producer, Zach Taylor, producer of the cassette documentary, he always sends me pictures. He's like, Summer, I was just in a store and I found this tape. So it's
Very cool.
yeah, and I think also after Lou Otten's passing, there was I think that also did something. I mean, certainly after Justo passed away, something happened within the DJ community where people just felt that nostalgia bubble up,
Mhm.
right, and needed to do something,
Yeah,
which is why I still want to encourage a large part of my work is encouraging people studying music to study tapes and cassettes and nostalgia and all of that. Because I think as people read, that's what helps keep it, that's what keeps it going is people researching them and talking about them and
right.
being able to read the stories that are attached
So
to,
when students are
yeah,
studying music there, um, and you say study tapes and mixtapes, the is it that they go because 'cause they're young, right? So they probably don't have any. I'm assuming they're
yeah,
young.
yeah.
Um, so is it that they ask their parents and their aunts and uncles and their distant cousins, second cousins, what have you, and get their stories, or how does that look?
Well, I mean, even for me personally, right? Like when I met Justo, I think we were like maybe 10 years apart. So I learned about a history of cassettes that I wasn't even directly involved in, especially when it came to DJs and artists like in the early 80s. I wasn't in the club in the 80s, like I was still a kid. um, so I learned that history through him and other people and other DJs. And I think a lot of the researchers that I speak to now, I'm so humbled that I've had two or three college students write papers about the Mixtape Museum or write papers about cassettes. But they mention the Mixtape Museum, and that is so special. Um, but yes, they are interviewing people who, similar to how hip hop started because young people had access to their parents' record collections, right? It wasn't hip hop music, but it may have been jazz, funk, reggae, could have been many things. So I think, and that's what I like about visiting classes like Larry's class. First of all, you'd be surprised at how many students know what a cassette is. And I don't, this is why I love mentorship because I get so much out of learning from young people. And I don't like to discount or go into a situation thinking they know nothing. Because they know a lot more than we think. When I did a talk
Right?
at the New York Hall of Science for the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and it was like the science of sound, and we highlighted the mixtape and I passed around a blank Maxwell tape still in plastic, and you could, as we were talking through the panel, you could hear the kids trying to like pop it open and like trying to open it and crack the case. um and some of those kids were just like, oh yeah, my dad has these tapes, right? And my mom, one kid told a story about like how his dad had a collection, and like his mom like tried to get him to throw it away, right? But and then the dad
Oh,
came
no.
to talk to me after and was like, oh my gosh, like these are all DJs that I collected as a young person and I still have this collection. So yeah, they're learning through their parents' collections or friends or aunts and uncles' collections. And I
Mhm.
think this is what's so important about the Association for Recorded Sound collections is collections need to be researched, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, that's what I want to close with, Summer, is how how can how and where can people get involved? What do you need for Mixtape Museum, the uh, collection resource you just mentioned there? We didn't touch on much of the BAM work you're doing. Maybe we can have another chat about that. But I guess, what do you need? How can people get involved? I'm sure there are tapes floating all over people listening to this. They want to help document, or if they want to contribute funds or time, I don't know, whatever. How can people help?
Yeah, I am interested in your stories. I'm interested in, like, if you hear me, go dig in a Timberland or Nike shoebox, because that's where people save tapes. We did a whole thing about that. Or in your parents' attic or wherever they might be. Um, and I mean, again, I don't encourage anyone to just throw a tape into a dirty radio because it might damage them, but I do
Be
know
the
people that can
last of
fix
that one.
them. Um, but I'm interested in the stories. I think uh, after I wrap up this Grammy grant, I am interested in connecting with more collectors to see how to just do a survey to see what people need, so that I know what to go and uh, what the resources are. I'm interested in connecting with people that are one of the things I'm working on is a fellowship program. I'm interested in creating that space for people to be funded to study these tapes, particularly in hip hop, but not just hip hop. Um, so that's something that I'm starting to think about, is how to make that possible. So yeah, and just also, again, like, the Mixtape Museum has not been something I've been able to do on my own. And what I mean by that is it's people that have guided me through ideas and feelings and stories. And that's how I'm able to decide what my next steps are. But I just want to hear from people and collect their stories. So if there's any way to amp that up, like, I'm all for it.
I love it. Well, hopefully people listening have a story, and we'll share it with you,
Yeah. And
and
I'm
we'll
findable
keep
everywhere.
documenting.
Yeah, online. I'm findable everywhere. Just Google Mixtape Museum. Also, Dear Summer. I'm on every social media platform. I'm findable.
Yes, and of course, people know I'll include links to all of those that you provide to me, so they can easily get to them from the show notes here. Um, Summer, fantastic meeting and chatting with you,
Thank you so much.
and fascinating topic. A bit nostalgic as well, of course, and hopefully we'll have a chance to connect again in person. I don't know if you do you do you perform at all? Do you play?
I do not know. I was a ballet
You
dancer
don't?
back in the day. That's my only talent outside of
All right.
managing careers. But no, I don't perform.
Make music days coming up in June, so
That's right.
and
Yeah.
that's everybody who has the or the potential to play gets out and plays. So I thought maybe we can connect during that weekend, but we'll see. Hopefully, sometime in the future.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
please keep doing what you're doing. It's super cool, super important. And I mean, my perspective is we learn from the past to create the moment now that moves us, and that movement helps us continue to grow and shine and do better things in the future. So it's all about evolution in music, and you're documenting a key part of that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Music Evolves. I appreciate you all watching and listening and participating, and hopefully you have a chance to connect with Summer as well yourself. Please do subscribe to the podcast and newsletter, and stay tuned for more as we keep looking for ways to let the music move us.